G'day, this is James Stroud, and we're going to talk about how to position HSTPs on a concept plan so that we can okay, what I'm going to try and do is put together a video that someone can go and look at if they want to learn how to position HSTPs, household sewage treatment plants and water tanks, on a building site. Typically what's happening at this stage is that you're trying to create a concept plan that you can send off to the draftsman and also the engineer, so that they can get the designs done and get the owner's wishes on paper. I've chosen a typical site plan here just to use as an example. Step one is to identify the uphill and downhill side of the house. If you look at the numbers on here, you'll see that they are changing as the contours go down. So basically, you do need to understand how contour plans work. And once you've got that sorted, you can work out that this side of the block over here is actually higher, and this side down here is lower. So step one is to identify which is uphill and which is downhill. And the reason for that is that the HSTP must go on this half of the house because it is downhill. So the HSTP has to be downhill from the house. There's just no way around that. Clients often see their block plan as a big square block of dirt that they can put anything anywhere they want, and you know they've just paid big money for it and made some huge sacrifices. So you can understand why they'd feel that way. So you have to explain to them that regardless of what landscaping plans they may have had in mind, their HSTP has to go on the downhill side of the house. Now, because we know from experience that people do not like looking at their HSTP when they're eating, we don't put the HSTPs on the side of the house where the alfresco is, or where the windows are, or anything like that. We try and put it over on the bedroom side of the house. So HSTPs must go on this side, on the downhill side. It needs to be away from the alfresco. People don't want to see it when they eat. So just to recap, you identify which side of the house is downhill, and then you identify which side of the house, which side of that half of the house is looked at the least. Or in other words, what side will you not see when you're eating or looking out your windows? So now we've identified the areas that we don't want to build it, so that only leaves one small area. It's basically the downhill side of the house and the quadrant of the house that is least likely to be viewed by the client. Now that we have determined the quadrant that the HSTP is best suited to, we need to be a minimum of 5 meters and a maximum of 10 meters from the house. So that doesn't really leave a lot. Now, it's a minimum of 5 meters from the house and a maximum of 10. So what we'll do is we'll just work on that a little bit. Now this looks a little bit messy, but what we've done is we've showed, here's the side of the house, and this dimension line shows 10 meters, and this shows 5. So that space there is less than 10 and more than 5. And this space in here that's colored red is less than 10, which is there, and more than 5. So that shaded in area is basically the only place we can put the HSTP tank. Now, when you take all of the quadrants away and the dimension lines and everything else, you're left with this shaded area, which is less than 5, or more than 5, and less than 10, not over here where the alfresco area is, downhill from the house. So that's really the area where you can put it. So it's quite simple. So clients don't understand that. They need to have it explained to them. You just have to take the time to tell them why it has to go where, and they'll accept. So we've taken a few other considerations into account. We've taken the shaded area out, and we've looked And because these contour banks are very steep, the land obviously drops away very quickly right there. So we don't want to be mounting an HSTP in a weird location like that. So, and we don't want it over on this side because it's getting close to the the alfresco area where people are eating. So let's just keep it right here on this little piece of dirt. That's kind of the only spot it can go. The other consideration is the cut and fill line. Now, because this is uphill and this is downhill, we'll be taking the dirt from this side of the house and using it to make the pad on this side of the house. So once you get farther out from the house, you'll find that there's a certain amount of fill there. We don't want that HSTP going in fill, so that's another reason why we would avoid putting it in this area. Now, considering the position of the HSTP and fill is going to be more important the steeper the site. So on flat sites, it's not going to be such a big deal. But the standard rule is to avoid placing the HSTP tanks or water tanks, any buried tanks in fill of any type. They need to go on natural ground. We'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit further down the track here. Okay, so now we've got the HSTP tank position. We understand why that's the best position for it on this particular site. We've got to position the water tank. So same thing, people tend not, there's more options for a water tank like this. It could go here, it could go over here, it could go over here, but people tend to not want to look at it. It looks a bit industrial. The garage is over here, the bedrooms, the laundry. That leads you to making this side of the house the industrial, the ugly side, you might say. And because, let's look at the map here. Northwestern light will be coming in from this direction here. So that would be a pretty good option. Most of the time the owners, people building the houses, will accept your recommendations if you seem to have some plausible explanation for it. So up here in the top corner, again, we have some rules to positioning water tanks. Now to position the water tank, water tanks need to be minimum 5 meters from the house, maximum 10 meters from the house, within the building envelope. Water tanks should be as close as possible to pad level on the cut and fill side. Avoid having the tanks higher than the house, lower is better. Tanks must not be positioned in fill again. So let's go through that a little bit slower. The reason that the tanks need to be 5 meters from the house is when you dig a big hole, the hole can dislodge the footings if it's too close to the house. So 5 meters is a good rule of thumb. The reason that the tanks can't be more than 10 meters from the house is usually there's the allowance in the contract doesn't allow for the tanks to go any further. The other reason is that in the case of an HSTP, the farther we go from the house, the deeper the sewer pipe gets. So technically, if we had the HSTP too far from the house, it could be way, way underground. And that's a subject on its own. But basically, if we follow these rules here, it all works out fairly well. Now, tanks must be within the building envelope. Make no mistake that the council and the certifiers will view the tanks like a building. If they're outside the building envelope, we won't get our approval. Water tanks should be as close as possible to pad level. So going back to the drawing here, we're going from the house, we're going uphill this way and downhill this way. So what we need to do is make sure that because of that, the fill will be getting deeper out in these extreme corners. This line here indicates the cut fill line. Now the cut fill line is the elevation which won't change. It's already exactly perfect to build the house on, but unfortunately it's only 1 millimeter thick. So we have to take the dirt from this side and put it over here and make a pad. So these areas in here on the two extreme corners are areas to avoid when positioning tanks, because the earthworks will be more extreme in those areas. Okay, so if you have a look at this, this explains the whole earthworks thing a little more. Because we've got to take the dirt here from this side, there will be batters along there, and we'll put the dirt down here, so there will be batters going out that way. So the HSTP needs to be, you can sometimes tuck it into just the edge of the batter there. Basically the bottom of the tank needs to be sitting on virgin soil. Now this water tank here, we've positioned it here where it's closer to the cut and fill line. It's got to be a minimum of 6 meters from the HSTP right there, and it's got to be a minimum of 5 meters from the house. So those are some limiting factors in relation to positioning of water tanks. So now that we've got the water tanks sorted out, we've got to position the spray areas. Typically we want a big wide open area. Try to avoid areas where there are trees, but you might not always have that option. It's got to be 15 meters from the house. You can't have people, let's say the owner wanted a shed in this area here. You can't have people driving through that spray area. You can't have veggie gardens planned. There again, people can do whatever they want after the council leaves, but it has to be planned correctly or we won't get our approvals. Okay, so it's a minimum of 6 meters between the HSTP and H2O tanks. It's a minimum of 5 meters between house and tanks. Okay, well, I can only hope that I've left you with a little bit more knowledge about how to position tanks. It's a very basic, simple illustration. An understanding of contour plans and how they work is obviously going to be a help, and a bit of an understanding of how the earthworks typically turns out. You could always go and talk to the operations manager, or anyone with a builder's license would be able to help you out with this bit, one of the supervisors. So good luck with it, and thanks for listening.